This podcast is brought to you by the Oddities Coffee Shop and Novelty Store, located at 4182 Cordata Parkway here in Bellingham, Washington. We're serving up organic coffee from Camano Island Coffee Roasters, and we have freshly baked pastries from Avenue Bread, delicious donuts from LaFine's, and warm bagels from the Baglery. We carry toys, gifts, games, and unique items for your home, so please come on down and check us out. I
You're
always feel weird
listening
'cause I
to the
put this mic in
Oddities
front of people and they're very
They're like, I don't want
they
to.
can't move. I always tell everyone it's okay. You can chill. Like if you need a shift, grab it and move.
Yeah.
But no one ever does.
Hang out here. There, I already did it.
Yeah. Well, it's
Broke
always
the
like an
seal.
awkward thing because you're like, you have these lights on your face and you're trying to talk and it's like so unnatural.
That's true.
But-
Yeah, and I've never done this, so.
How have you been? When's the last time I saw you? been a
It
long
has to
time.
have been at least 4 months because we've
Uh-huh.
been
I think
out of the bars.
actually I think I haven't seen you at Temple Bar for a while because last time I was in there, I think I messaged you because I'd gone in there a couple times and hadn't seen you. And I'm
Yeah.
like, hey, what's up? Do you still work here? And you're like, I forget you said, but you're working somewhere else too.
Yeah, I have a second job at Backdoor, hence
Uh-huh.
hence the Backdoor
Yeah, you got the-
mask. Yeah,
That's dope.
I'm branded.
Are you still working at Temple Bar?
Yes, I am.
So what's the bar life like? I haven't been to a bar since the shutdown. So
Yeah, we're doing some remodeling in the
Uh-huh.
Temple Bar right now. So we
Oh.
haven't been open for to go. We've been combined with the Mount Bakery.
uh-huh.
So I've been out
What
of
do you mean
work.
you've been combined with the Bakery?
They have the same owners now, and so we're doing cocktails for
Uh-huh.
them. But
For-
we're not actually selling to go out of Temple Bar space right now.
But you can't go into the Temple Bar and dine in, like sit
No.
or anything. Oh. Are
Not
they waiting
yet.
for phase 3 for that or what?
At least, yeah.
Yeah, it's a bummer, man. That's one of my favorite spots in town. I don't
Yeah.
get out much because I work so much, and so then when I
Fair.
do go out, I go and either chat with. Usually, I see Mason all the time, so he's usually
Yeah.
the guy that we talk about travel a lot.
Of course.
He's a big traveler,
He is.
and
yeah.
you've been traveling lately, huh? Down to Seattle.
Yeah, just little road trips, I guess.
How's that been for you?
A little bit much.
When was the first protest
um,
that you went to down there?
So I first got there the day after there's a march here in Bellingham where
Mhm.
people caravan down to Seattle, and that was when there was a bunch of cop cars set on fire, looting down at Nordstrom over
And so,
in
do you know how soon
Westlake
after
Center.
the George Floyd incident that the protest you went to was?
I can't remember. The timelines are a little bit blurred.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I was down there for about a month, and
Mhm.
so everything kind of feels like one big blur. But George Floyd was Memorial Day weekend,
Yeah.
and it was pretty soon after that. I think within the week.
So in Bellingham, you said you called it a caravan. Is that what you said?
Yeah, so there was
of
a march
people-
where people were getting into cars to
Mhm.
go down to Seattle together.
Oh, wow.
And I ended up leaving the next day after that. I couldn't leave with the caravan because I had prior commitments. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, then I went down the next day after I had seen what had happened, and I figured, this is going to be something that's, happening for the long haul.
Mhm.
And I wanted to be there and be a part of it. I'm not at work. I'm physically capable. I had the time, and it just felt like something
Mhm.
I really, really needed to do. So
So when you saw it, just like the obligation to go down there and like protest, like when you go down there, had you been to protests before, or is this like one of the first ones you went to?
I've been to protests in the past.
Mhm.
I went to Washington, D.C. for Donald Trump's inauguration.
Oh, you did?
And so I was around
Uh-huh.
for those protests, and I was also around for the Women's March.
Oh, that's
And that was
cool.
kind of like what kickstarted being interested in activism for me.
Yeah, how did you do when you went to his inauguration? Was it you and a group of friends? Did you fly? Did you road trip? Like what was
I flew out there by myself.
just all alone,
Yeah.
huh? Do you know anyone in the area, or you just
No.
do you like Airbnb, or what do you do?
So I ended up staying with somebody who's like kind of distantly related to my stepdad
Mhm.
in Virginia, and I would wake up at like 4 or 5 in the morning every
Ooh,
day
uh-huh.
and take a bus, multiple subways,
Uh-huh.
and another bus
What
into
motivated
downtown.
you to fly out there and do that?
At the time, I was a photojournalism student at Western,
Mhm.
and I convinced my professors to let me use that as like my final project, I guess.
Oh, that is cool.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so you were there, you taking a bunch of photos, writing down the whole experience.
Exactly.
And how did the project turn out for you in the end? Were
It
you going
was
because you were against Trump, or just because you wanted to like participate in a protest, or were you going from like a journalism point of view? Or
I
just
was going for a journalistic point of view
Uh-huh.
for sure. I definitely wanted to do like a compare and contrast of the different crowds at the inauguration versus the women's march, as well as like the different energies. And it was like the first women's march on DC that has ever like specifically taken place as a response to Donald Trump's inauguration. So yeah,
So
it
the
was.
women's march happened before he got
It,
before
it
the
happened the
inauguration,
day
right?
after inauguration.
Okay. And that you said that women's march was the first one
That was
that
the
they.
first one. It
Uh-huh.
was organized as a response to,
And what
like,
were
obviously
the?
there's been, women's rights and
Mhm.
like the suffragette movement, but specifically in response to Donald Trump was that was like the result of that.
And was it because of all his like sexual harassment allegations? Like, what was the? What were women upset about? Like, why was that?
Um I mean, in a lot of ways, the Trump administration has been a direct attack on a lot of people's
Mhm.
rights.
Yeah.
Not just women, but
Uh-huh.
reproductive rights being one of his like main.
Will you use a phone to shoot a couple videos for us while we're doing this? We always forget to do this. Do you want to do it on my phone or yours? No, it's clear. That's okay. Here, I'll give you this. We like to shoot some just off the cuff unedited videos
Yeah,
for the IG story. There you
I'm here
go.
for
Oh.
it.
It's okay. It's casual, so it's not super
Yeah,
serious.
totally fine.
So, yes, keep
Got it.
going. So, women were upset, obviously, about Trump and all the things that it wasn't just women. I mean, it's really weird because it seems like he is only really for white men.
Pretty much, yeah.
It seems to be like the only thing he supports.
Yeah, so there's a lot of
Uh-uh.
like queer allies as well who are
Uh-huh.
upset about the possibility of having their rights reeled back, and just a lot of it
Yeah.
was I think it was a definitely a fear response of, being worried that because of this president so many people's rights are going to be taken away, and all of the progress that we've been
Mhm.
working towards, which still we have a ways to go either
Mhm.
way, but the progress that we've been working towards would just be reeled right back and we'd be back at square one.
Here's the thing that's interesting to me. I always wonder about, like, when you see all those presidential candidates are always so freaking old, like mid to late 70s. And I would think to myself, well, why is that? Well, typically, for most people, not all people, but as you age, you get older, you gain wisdom, knowledge, life experience. You see things from history kind of start to repeat themselves. And if you've learned from history, you see, oh, that's not the way we should do things. And so when you see a person who's like in their 70s, who's also still racist and sexist, it's like you've been alive long enough to have evolved past these issues that you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, how are you still displaying this kind of behavior as an old man? Because I would like to think when I'm an old person, I would be a little bit more involved and
Yeah.
enlightened, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and the thing is like those people don't really want their like status quo to change.
Uh huh.
They're really, really comfortable and set in their ways. I've had conversations with people who are even younger than their 70s, and they're like, well, I was raised this way
Mm-hmm.
and I'm comfortable with the way that I'm living now. I'm comfortable living in the bubble that I'm in, and I don't really want to change it
Who are
because I'm
raised,
too
who
old.
are raised like racist? You mean, or sexist or
Just,
whatever?
yeah, like
Uh huh.
I mean, in an inherently white supremacist
Mm-hmm.
structure, colonialist structure,
Yeah.
you're raised to have certain biases. You're raised to only see within the scope of your own experience. It's like a very individualized
Mm-hmm.
society as well. So people don't really, it's not that they don't have the capacity for empathy. It's that empathy is not necessarily encouraged.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that that is the reason. Like people just don't, they can't see beyond
Yeah.
their own lives, whatever's close to them, whatever's right in front of them, and they're not trying to. And I think that as you get older, you're less inclined to change any of that because you've been doing it for so long and you're comfortable.
Yeah. And you haven't been challenged or threatened in any way by your belief system. One of the things I think I try to wrap my head around, because everywhere I drive, I see a lot of businesses with like Black Lives Matter on the window,
Mm-hmm.
which is nice. But a part of me, I try to imagine, like, I try to relate the whole thing to my life of like, if you are a person who's racist or sexist or against gay marriage or trans or anything, I try to think, okay, people who are racist, like you just mentioned, it's usually they were raised that way or brought up that way. It's an ideology, right?
Right.
They think that having white skin or being gay or whatever it is, like they're just identified with their own belief system.
Mm-hmm.
And then so I start to think about belief systems, and I thought, I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school for 10 years. I went to church twice a week, once with the school, once with my parents.
Right.
We prayed before every meal, we prayed before bed. my parents, are religious. At a very, very young age, like in my teens, I started to question a lot of it.
Mhm.
It just didn't make sense to me, and taking the Bible literally seems, crazy to me. And like I started to have all these questions where my brain is just kind of very logical, and I think try to think rationally about these things. I'm thinking, well, this doesn't make sense. And then I sat down with my priest one day with like a long list of questions,
Mm.
and he just had like no answers for a lot of these things. I'm thinking, oh, this is all just kind of like made up. Like this doesn't feel like anything I'm gonna identify with that's gonna become a part of me, where I'm then gonna go to church every week and like believe any. I'm not religious now,
Yeah.
but I was raised that way, and I think of ideologies, whether it be religion, or if you're racist, or if you're against gay marriage or any of this stuff. I think, well, how does that change in an individual? For me, it changed organically because I was raised in an environment where we went to church every Sunday. We prayed
Mhm.
all the time, like da da da. But I just naturally, through whatever you want to call it, I don't know, genetics or the way my brain is wired, where I question everything,
Right.
I got out of it. But I wonder when you see people who are racist, that is their ideology, is saying Black Lives Matter on a business going to change how they feel, because it's like saying to me religion is BS or God doesn't exist. When you attack someone's ideology, which is their identity and how they were raised, and this is, I don't have an answer. It's just an open question and thing I wonder about. Is like, I know we're trying to change racism and all this stuff, and I just wonder, the Black Lives Matter thing. It's nice to see that the community is supporting, Black people, but the people who support them aren't the ones needing the change or the education. It's the people who don't, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder, like, is that gonna have an effect? I'm sure you might get it. I just wonder, is the mass going to influence people who don't feel that way? And I don't
Yeah.
have an answer. I'm just wondering. What do you think?
I don't necessarily have an answer for that
Uh huh.
either. I think it's a very big question, but I do think that that's why activism is so important, and specifically disruption
Mm-hmm.
through activism. There are a lot of people that disagree with the destruction of property, or, getting in people's faces and getting loud and
Mm-hmm.
causing a ruckus or blocking traffic or whatever it may be. People definitely disagree with that, but I think that it makes the people who aren't already listening, who turn a blind eye to the businesses that say Black Lives Matter on the window, like
Yeah.
it makes them listen.
Yeah.
And it's, something that's getting in their way, it's inconveniencing them. It's whether they agree with the message right now or not, it's at least putting it on their radar.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's important that there are people who are maybe questioning their ideologies up until this point because of the like uprising of activists right now,
Yeah.
especially like young activists are at the forefront of this movement right
Mm-hmm.
now. I see a lot of people who are my age or even younger, like in their early 20s, in their teens even. A lot of like high school students are organizing these protests, and I think that when the generation after yours is like your kids, your grandkids are yelling and screaming and destroying property over this, that it's going to at least make some people start to listen.
Yeah.
I would hope.
Well, I definitely think there's going to be a change and things are going to move in a better direction. I think every time there's a civil rights movement, it seems like we've had like, the Civil War and slavery, and we've gone through different movements in time to balance out racism and like everything, like women not being able to vote back
Mm-hmm.
in the day. And like we slowly just have these like social uprisings or like things happen that make the world a better place and kind of push it towards a better world. And I often think, it's weird. I try to like kind of reconcile it in my mind. Like, there's always going to be racist people, and there's always going to be poor people, and there's always going to be this and that. And I think a lot of the times, when you think about just the issues we try to fix or make better, is that they're always going to exist to some degree, one way or another, and to just make your peace, because I feel like trying to change everything is great, and you definitely should be doing it. But then, if your ultimate goal is to have some absolute resolution where you've 100% succeeded and it's completely been eradicated from the world,
Mm-hmm.
you're just going to feel like very stressed and angry, because you're constantly going to be seeing examples of it in the world, whether it's here or someplace else in the world. So I'm just saying, like, me personally, I've kind of look at the world now as this ever evolving place of where there's always going to be, I don't want to say good and bad people, but for lack of a better label, there's always going to be like good and bad that are pushing on each other. That's
Mm-hmm.
going to give you the balance of the world, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think what's happening is great, and I totally agree with you. I think things are going to move in a better direction. I'm not 100% sure how, because when you look at like the racism and like the way police um, violence happens and the abuses that happen and the racism, I'm not really sure how you change that or fix that.
Right.
I don't know. Like if I was the king of the world and I could wave a magic wand, like I don't know what I would do exactly.
Yeah.
I know they want to defund the police,
Hmm.
which I think is a good idea based on the limited education I've had researching the subject. I
Hmm.
think is a good step. I think more training for police is also appropriate, where they should be practicing on a weekly basis situations where they can de-escalate the situation. Because I think a lot of police are having this experience where they get very limited training when they go to the police academy,
Hmm.
and then they're in this job for 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, and they don't have to go back for training again. And
Right.
there's not like a consistent training where they should be having consistent training in the police where they're seeing real world examples of things they could encounter, so they're versed and they have repetitions in these in certain instances that arise, because I think they're so quick to pull out their gun and shoot people. We've talked about this in previous podcasts, but they're just so quick to escalate to shooting or violence that's probably not necessary in most of the cases. And I was wondering about this on the last podcast, like why is police violence so high, like shootings
Yeah.
in this country with the police? But I don't know. So when you were in Washington D.C. though, I'm curious, like what was that experience like? The march and the inauguration.
I would say it was less extreme than what's happening right now,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that it's had 4 years now to marinate, and on top of that, it's been over 400 years of anger and frustration and injustice. And I think now what's happening, I mean, we're seeing the largest civil rights movement that we've ever seen in the history of the world. Like
Mm-hmm.
every single state in the US has participated in some kind of protests, and there are multiple countries outside of the US that also have seen a lot of protests specifically centered around George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and
Mm-hmm.
police brutality in general. Um, so I think that what we're seeing right now is a manifestation of just more of that built up frustration that was sparked at the beginning of Trump's
Mm-hmm.
um, election.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you mentioned also something about like constantly living in that like stress and anger. And as difficult as it is, I think that it's really important, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a place for that stress and anger. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't find joy in their lives, but I do think that it's going to be like I'm going to be dead before we see the resolve to this. It's going to happen after my lifetime. I'm not protesting because I think next week we're going to see some very
Mm-hmm.
serious changes. I'm protesting because I don't want to see things continue to move in the direction that they have been
Yeah.
for the next generations. So I definitely don't think, I think I'll be very old if I
Mm-hmm.
see it in my lifetime, but I don't think that it's going to happen now. But I
Mm-hmm.
still think it's important to live in that state of, some stress and some anger, and do something
Yeah.
with that and do something about it. It's not easy,
Mm-hmm.
but it's, more important to me to feel that than to just be silent
Yeah.
and not be doing something about it when I can.
Mm-hmm.
And I have privilege that I have to acknowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not using that privilege, then I'm participating in racism as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to me not to do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's been like I guess, my main motivator since the beginning of my time participating in activism.
Mm-hmm. And what was it like in Seattle when you went down there with that group? What was the first day like down there?
Peaceful.
Yeah.
Um, and I expected going down, um, that things were going to continue escalating with, looting and
Mm-hmm.
destruction of property. And I was fine with that,
What part of
honestly.
Seattle were you in?
Um, we marched from Westlake
Mm-hmm.
Center up to Capitol Hill and back again, like
Mm-hmm.
pretty often. It's kind of like a game of cat and mouse
Mm-hmm.
between us and the cops.
Like,
Um,
how, like, what do you mean? You're running like the cops are following you, trying to push you out of there? Is that what you
they're
mean?
they're it's they're like boxing us into certain areas so
Okay.
that we could march, but not get too much in the way.
Mm-hmm.
They had like road closures, and they would, find where we were marching and block that off.
Uh-huh.
Um, so we basically got corralled between like Pine Street up by the East Precinct
Mm-hmm.
and down at Westlake Center.
Mm-hmm. And how many people do you think were with you? Like estimate, like is there?
It grew every day.
Uh-huh.
I really don't remember
Uh-huh.
what the numbers were like on the first day. But definitely less than, I don't know if you saw any of the like bird's eye view
I
photos
saw
from when we
some,
were
yeah.
outside of the East Precinct, but
Mm-hmm.
once we kind of settled outside of the precinct, that was when numbers started to grow
Mm-hmm.
more and more every day.
And were you just camping out there?
I was staying with my parents at the time and just driving down every morning.
Okay. Oh
Um,
wow. Mm-hmm.
but yeah, it grew every day, and I guess the biggest like blanket statement I can make is that it never wasn't peaceful on the protesting end.
Uh-huh.
Again, destruction of property I don't think is outside of the realm of peaceful
Mm-hmm.
protests. But yeah, there was definitely no violence on our end. It
Mm-hmm.
was all on the police end.
And what were the police doing?
Um, Essentially finding every excuse possible to employ the use of chemical weapons,
Uh-huh.
rubber bullets, pepper pellets. Uh,
Dang.
yeah.
Were they shooting tear gas into the groups down there?
hmm
And was it just trying to get them to break up, or what was happening? Get them to
Yeah.
stop looting, or?
So initially, the first week, there was a curfew.
Uh-huh.
And so after curfew, if there were still people out protesting, after a little while, they would declare it an unlawful assembly
Uh-huh.
because we were all supposed to be out of the city by that time. Um, which is interesting because a lot of the time people couldn't get out. The
Mm-hmm.
roads were blocked off. They couldn't go anywhere. So they were being corralled in and being told to leave, but then also being told that they're not allowed to leave
Uh-huh.
anymore. And
Uh-huh.
that's happened in other cities as well. It wasn't just Seattle. We've seen that happen in New York, Minneapolis,
Mm-hmm.
Philly, Chicago. They tried to have people uh, leave the city, but they had the bridge up,
Uh-huh.
so people couldn't get out of downtown.
What was a group of people who were protesting like? Was it mostly black people, white people, young people, old people, all different age groups? Like, what would you say was the mix, like age wise? And
Um, I would say it was definitely like it's hard to
uh
pin
huh,
a demographic. Definitely younger people though.
yeah,
Younger people like young queer people,
mm-hmm,
young black people, young white people, young native people. There's a lot of people from the Duwamish tribe
mm-hmm,
that were there, especially when the autonomous zone or CHOP
yeah.
was established. You know, they were there to kind of be like council.
And were you there in that area
hmm
when that was? How many days did you stay there or go there?
I camped there for about a week and a half.
And what was that like inside that
Um,
area?
the first day was confusing
Mm-hmm,
because the night before I had been there, and it probably for about an hour that street was just a war zone. There was like barricades that were set on fire, so it was
mm-hmm.
hard to get out, and yeah, tear gas for probably like a 3 block span of just like super thick clouds of tear gas. And
Dang. And did
we had
you get? I mean, I'm assuming, but did you get exposed to it? Did you inhale it to get in your eyes?
hmm
And what was that like? Severe burning or
super
what?
painful. Yeah.
Like it just burns your eyes really bad, and you
Yeah,
can't breathe very well.
all of your skin. Yeah, it's like hard to breathe.
I
Makes
read.
you salivate a lot.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah.
Wow. And you just have to get out of it and it goes away on its own, or do you have to put like water in your eyes, or?
Um, there were a lot of people with med supplies
Uh
around,
huh.
myself included. So you can use baking soda and water as a solution and put that on your skin, and it's
Uh huh.
supposed to counterbalance the acidity of the gas compound, and then like saline solution to rinse out your eyes.
Wow.
Yeah, and so people were just carrying that around and like standing kind of on the outskirts of where the tear gas clouds were and
hmm
trying to help people out who couldn't see.
And they just kept firing them into the group.
hmm
And how long did that go on for? Where they were just shooting them in there? Was it all night?
Um, well, on that particular Sunday, it was probably about an hour of them just like
Dang.
advancing on us.
Uh
There
huh.
was threats that they were potentially going to use LRAD, which is um like giant sonar
Oh, like a
devices.
sound
Like
thing
yeah, it's a sound cannon.
that hurts your ears to make you. Oh,
Not even,
dang.
it's like disorienting to the point it like shakes your organs and it makes you feel nauseous and
Whoa.
super disoriented. Yeah.
And did people end up dispersing and leaving, or did most of them stay?
Most people stayed.
And the cops just kind of gave up.
They would move their line forward,
Uh huh.
and they were threatening to start making arrests.
Uh huh.
And eventually, I think I left at around like 1 or 2 in the morning, somewhere
Mhm.
in there. Came back the next day, and the cops were just gone.
Yeah.
So that's
They
why
just
the first
left.
day was so confusing. We
Uh
got
huh.
there, and it kind of was like that false sense of victory, I
Mm-hmm.
think is kind of what SPD was going for.
Uh-huh.
We got there and we were like, oh, we fought for this. They left because we were like pushing back and fighting against them. Um, so yeah, there was just a lot of uncertainty in that moment for sure. No one was really sure what to do now.
Uh-huh. And so did you guys then just continue protesting in that area and day after day and the cops ever come back? Or I mean, I know eventually they did, but
Yeah. So
uh-huh.
I wasn't there when they came back. There was a couple of times where there were cops in the precinct building.
Mm-hmm.
But the entire time the building was left unlocked.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they had like boarded up the windows and kind of fenced it off, but it felt a little bit um like a trap in a way. That they were like expecting us to go in there and burn it down so that they
Mm-hmm.
could justify
Oh,
their
coming in
actions
there.
beforehand
Uh-huh.
and be like, well, this is why we had to, protect it with chemical weapons, and this is why we had to protect it with rubber bullets
Mm-hmm.
because this is what they were going to do. They were going to come burn it down. And there were definitely people that wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up doing a lot of the overnight security while I was there. Um, and it turned into a completely different place at night. A lot more people who were trying to burn down the precinct. Uh, where there were like 2 nights where we had fires that we had to put out
Mm-hmm.
around where people were camping outside of the precinct and fist fights breaking out as well. And that's not to try and make it seem like what was happening there wasn't peaceful per se, but it just I think it
And
a
did
lot
it
of like
uh-huh.
opportunists show up to something like that and
Yeah.
try and make something of it that it's not intended to be.
People probably want to go down there and try to escalate even further. I mean, incite violence because I heard some people died down there too.
Yeah, so the first week when I was there, there
Uh-huh.
was a lot of threats from like Proud Boys, 3%ers
What's that? I
specifically.
don't know what that is. Proud Boys?
Um, yeah, it's like a basically like a far right white
Oh, okay.
supremacist
Uh-huh.
sort of group. Um, I don't know too much about the Proud Boys. I can't speak on that very much, but um, Black Lives Matter is definitely not their
Yeah.
thing.
No, I
So,
just meant uh-huh.
so yeah, a lot of threats from them. They would be driving around the perimeter,
Mm-hmm.
um, just trying to intimidate.
Trying to start something.
Yeah.
They have guns on them? Probably.
Um,
You can tell.
I would assume
Uh-huh.
probably kind of there was a lot of people even in downtown Bellingham walking around like protecting local business,
Mm-hmm.
and they were also armed
Mm-hmm.
with weapons. So a lot of them were Proud Boys or three
Yeah.
percenters. So, um, yeah, yeah, just a lot of like weird tension
And how did you
around the
feel
space.
doing security there and being there day after day? What was your vibe like or your feeling like? Did you feel like, okay, this is good, we're moving in a good direction? Or was it starting to get out of control? Or do you feel like we've lost our focus? Or do you feel like we're doing good? Like, what was your feelings day after day
I
going
get
through that?
my personal feeling, and the reason that I ended up coming back home is because I did feel like it was sort of losing focus,
Uh huh.
or people were losing focus in the area just because it was being treated by some people, especially by a lot of the white people that I witnessed there, um, being treated as kind of like a relaxing space, like a I don't know, people would say like the music festival
Uh
vibe.
huh.
Um, and I didn't feel comfortable settling into that because it's not my time to rest as a white
Uh huh.
person. Like I should be continuing to do more. So after doing the first week and a half of overnight security, I felt like maybe there was, a different way that
Mm-hmm.
I could focus my energy. Um, so I went to as many other marchers as I could, but kind of tried to stay away from the main like Chop Chaz area
Mm-hmm.
and let it be for the people who have been fighting for their whole lives and for
Mm-hmm.
generations. Their families have been as well. And yeah, I didn't feel like it was appropriate for me to use that as a resting space ever. So
And do you feel like, these marches and these protests, do you see like real world examples of how they've changed things? Or are these protests, would you say, mainly beneficial in terms of raising awareness to the general population where, like you said, you're not going to see like an immediate change, but hopefully you raise like the consciousness or the awareness of society or maybe people in general or maybe people who are on the fence between their upbringing and trying to get out of that discrimination, racism. Like, have you seen any concrete examples from politicians? Let's just start there, where you think there's going to be some positive change. Because I haven't noticed anything really. I don't think the whole I mean, I haven't seen much in politicians' sides, whether it's presidents or governors or anything in general that I think is. But maybe I just haven't read the articles and seen it. But
Yeah.
what do you think? Have you seen
Well,
something?
I think that we've seen a direct result of the Seattle protests with the 50% defunding of SPD.
Yeah.
There's a veto-proof majority of city council
Now, when
members
they
who,
do that, are they? Because I read the idea is to not have police deal with mental health issues and all these other issues, but just to focus on police stuff, like rapes, murders, whatever. They go, and then they're going to defund the police. But then are they using those funds to create groups that are specifically designed to deal with like mental health and whatever other areas?
yeah, I don't know if the budget is fully proposed,
Uh
but
huh.
I think the idea would probably be to reallocate it into like existing parts of the budget that are lacking in funding.
Mhm.
Education being a big one. I would hope to see some of that money go there because 50% of SPD's budget is a huge chunk of money.
Mhm.
So I don't think it's going to go to any one place, but I think it's important to reallocate it into like areas of the city budget that are suffering. And then also there's the potential there for like new I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for. Not necessarily like a committee,
Uh
but
huh.
having different departments that are more equipped to deal with those non-emergency calls.
And for like people who don't really know, and I'm not super educated on this either. What is the idea behind defunding the police? Like I just kind of touched on it a little bit, but in your words, like what's the overall objective? What are they trying to do? Because a lot of people think defund the police. Like, what do you mean we need cops? Like, but what is it in general when people are saying that? What is it?
So the way that I see it
Uh huh.
is that we've been asking for a long time for police reform,
Mhm.
and time again we've seen that that doesn't really work. And so the idea behind defunding the police, and a lot of people also are on board with abolishing the police, is that we've settled into this like false sense of security by having police,
Mhm.
but in reality the police really aren't contributing any any positive
Mhm.
things to society. And so I think the idea is to figure out a different structure that works better,
Mhm.
to not have a police state, to not need, you know, more guns than people
Mhm.
who are supposed to be there protecting communities. And especially to take heavy police presence out of, you know, neighborhoods that have a disproportionate amount of people of color,
Mhm.
and to just completely, you know, take out that foundation and restructure
Mhm.
the way that we've been doing things and the way that we think we have to do things. I think that's the biggest like mental block for
Mhm.
people, especially older people like we were talking about, that it's been this way for so long for them that they can't imagine what the world would be like if we didn't have
Mhm.
police.
So, are you for defunding the police, or you personally getting rid of the police? Like, what? What do you?
I After conversations that I've
Mhm.
had, after the things that I've learned, I probably would have originally said that I'm for defunding the police,
Mhm.
but I am more on the abolishment end now.
And what would you do for like home invasions or like school shootings or like people that get murdered where you need like detectives to try to figure out well who did it? Like, what would you do in that case, like to replace those
Yeah.
or bank robberies or that type of thing?
I
Like,
mean, I can't say that I know exactly what that looks like,
uh
but
huh.
I can say that I don't feel like the police really contribute
Mhm.
as much as they could or should or are expected to in
Mhm.
those scenarios, especially like home invasion and stuff like that. Just to give one example, I think that when police respond to those, it's usually too late
Mhm.
for anything to be done directly, and they have a very limited amount of information and a very limited amount of time, and nothing usually comes of things being put under investigation.
Mhm.
And I think that that's the case for a lot of different types of calls as well. And so I myself don't have all the answers as to how
Mhm.
that could be changed, be restructured, but I just don't really think that we've, especially with the amount that goes into like financially that goes into the police, I don't
Mhm.
think that they've contributed nearly enough. And I think that we've seen kind of hopefully we've seen the end
Mhm.
of giving a disproportionate amount of money to police force that isn't really protecting us in the way that they're supposed to, the way that it was intended.
Mhm. Would you be in favor of police that just respond to certain things like an active shooter or like investigating murders or like if there's some tragic car accident or something? Do you not think it'd be better just to have them super specialized versus because I figure like if you completely get rid of the police, I feel like then you have to have all new groups to deal with like
Yeah.
different situations that are going to arise. Like, what do you do if there's an active shooter in a school, like
Yeah.
shooting kids? Like, you need somebody that's going to show up to stop that guy. Or, you know, I'm sure there's other examples. Like, if someone does get murdered, who's going to go investigate that murder? Or, like, you know, a bank robbery, or that's like anything. I feel like there are times where you need somebody, just like you'd call someone to fix your car, to like put out a
Yeah.
fire. Like, those certain things you're going to want like trained professionals, you know?
Yeah, so like specialized departments is definitely something that's been proposed. The biggest problem right now is that we've asked our police
Uh huh.
to do too many things. We've asked them to wear every single hat. Um, people who work in
Uh
city
huh.
council are basically having police going and like doing their dirty work for them. That's, they're doing too many things, and I think that's why we see so much bad policing,
Mm-hmm.
is because they're constantly responding to things that can't necessarily all be in one person's wheelhouse.
There's no way. Like even me, and I feel like I couldn't do that job. And I deal with stressful, hard shit all the time. I think 8 hours a day of just dealing with domestic violence and also just the idea of like, you know, police getting killed every year is a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you never know when you pull someone over if that's the last car you're ever going to walk up to because you don't know who's inside and what they're going to do because cops do get killed. And so they're always probably walking around with a low level of anxiety anyway,
Yeah.
especially if they're going to a violent situation where there's fighting in a home. They don't, I mean, that's all that situation's already at an 8, 9, or 10.
Yeah.
Or they're going, approaching a car of a guy who was driving wild, almost hit somebody. They finally got the car pulled over. Like, I just know me, like, that would be insanely stressful. And then to just know that most people dislike you and hate you already. And then, like, just constantly having to deal with every single day you're not going to like happy places usually every single day. It's like stressful,
Yeah.
trying to de-escalate this problem, doing this, and that job would just be so overwhelming. I just imagine a reformed police department, if they ever went that route, would have to be, I think, counseling on a weekly basis, de-escalation training, also decompression of police in general, so they're just not like 8, 10 hours a day every day working in these situations that are stressful and scary and anxiety provoking, and also just more training and just more of that. Like, how untrained and undertrained our police are is just staggering. I've listened to talks on this on podcasts and in the news and stuff, and they have very, very little training. But
Mm-hmm.
like, you back to your point, is like they're not trained to deal with mental health. Like, they're not counselors or sociologists, or like to try to deal with that situation. And there's just like many different situations that they've kind of been pawned off on that they have to deal with now, which I don't know. Olivia, what do you feel about all this stuff?
I feel like it's gonna be a while.
Uh-huh.
I
What are your thoughts on the police, like defunding them or eliminating them altogether?
I don't
What?
know a whole ton.
Uh-huh.
I think I would rather be more like in my comfort zone. I would go for just defund and reallocate. I definitely think there needs to be more education.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like what you had said. You mentioned it to me a few times about how the Navy SEALs or Marines get so much training in different special things.
Mm-hmm.
And so they do the situation over and over and over again. And then it becomes pretty easy.
Yeah, just through repetition
Yeah.
of training for different scenarios. I mean, there's this one case a couple years ago. I don't remember all the details, but this kid walked out of a convenience store, had a hood on, and a cop had his gun drawn at this kid and was telling him, "Hey, put your hands up or turn around," and he didn't comply. And then the cop kept like yelling at him with his gun out, and the kid turned around and reached into his pocket to pull something out, and the cop shot and killed him. But he was reaching in his hoodie to pull out his cell phone because he had earbuds in, and couldn't hear the cop. And so he's pulling out to kind of pause to hear what he said, and the cop shot and killed him on accident. And it's like that situation, this whole idea of like training from the military, this guy Jocko Willink, who was a 20-year Navy SEAL, who has a leadership company called Echelon Front. He's written books on leadership, and he has his own podcast. And he had talked about, when they were Navy SEALs, they would train for 18 months before they would go out on deployment, and they would train every single week. They would rehearse scenarios where they would set up one group that was the attacker, and like they would rehearse real situations they might encounter when they go to war. And he's saying the police don't do any of this ever. They
Hmm.
go to the academy once and then they're boom. He goes, they need to weekly be out there on a weekly basis training and de-escalation. And he was watching that video of that cop who shot that kid, and he's like, this cop, he's right out in the open. He's like, if he felt like that kid was a threat, he should have been behind cover, like behind his car. Instead, he's the cops right out in the open because they don't have the training. They don't have any kind of weapons. They just don't know how to approach situations, and they just picked it apart. And he's like, they need more training on these situations. This like should have never happened. So it's such a complex issue of like not being trained properly, not continued training, de-escalation, counseling. And another point that's been made is like, who wants to be a cop right now
Yeah.
with all that's happening?
Well, that's the
No
thing
one's
is
gonna want that job.
it's attracting a certain type of person,
I would
I'll
never fucking
say.
do that
Yeah.
job. And I consider myself to be a decent person
Yeah.
who's not racist, and I have gone to school for counseling. And I think on average, my head's together enough. I feel like I would never in a million years do that job.
Right.
Never. Like, you couldn't pay me. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
There's no way I would do it. First of all, first of all, driving around, I'm going to know majority of these people I'm passing hate my guts. And then the ones I do, and when are you called? When there's violence or shooting or
Yep.
rape or a fight or you're pulling someone over. You're always in these situations that are not fun
Yeah.
and that are negative. The constant stress of that, it's like a thankless job, and you quickly become us versus them. You quickly become we're on our team with the cops versus, and that's another, it's just like the whole thing's a mess, but I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it kind of attracts now these people who are there's either like this machismo factor to it where like
Uh-huh.
I'm defending my country, I'm defending freedom. I'm here defending blue lives, which are not a thing.
Uh-huh.
And
What are blue lives? The cops?
cops.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And it's attracting people who aren't as even keeled and level headed
Yeah,
as you are describing because like you
exactly.
said, people who are, more rational and more aware of what's going on don't want to be cops right now, but there are people
Hmm.
that still do because they believe that they're doing the right
Hmm.
thing, but they're doing it for the wrong reasons in a
Yeah.
structure that's very, very broken.
It's hard, because there are good people out there that want to give back and help, and you might look at it as, oh, I would make a great cop because I'm not one of these guys who's racist. I am a person who comes from a fucked up childhood myself. We had interactions with police growing up, so I know what it's like to how cops come to your house, and I know how we were treated. So I don't want to. I think if I became a cop, I would have it. I can now see it from the other point of view of like growing up in this dysfunctional family where cops showed up. I now know what it's. So if I get called to those situations, I can then be compassionate and understanding, and I can actually know because I grew up in that situation, like
Yeah.
how to. And so you do get people who are good people going to become cops because they really think they want to make a difference. And it's no difference in becoming a counselor or doing charitable work for someone. Like there are good people out there who are police, and it's always the minority that can ruin it for everybody in every situation. It's not just police, it's everything. And yeah, so the whole situation is just it's just crazy. I mean, it's insane, what happened with the George Floyd thing, but
Yeah.
the protests now, how active are they still in Seattle? Is it still happening? Because I know it's still happening a little bit, but I feel like it's kind of dying down a little bit.
It's happening, I would say, in different ways
Uh-huh.
now, but it's absolutely still happening. I was just there this past Sunday for a abolish ICE
Mm-hmm. Explain what that
protest.
is, please.
It was just you know, not centered around the Black Lives Matter
Uh-huh.
movement specifically,
It's
but
immigration, right?
yeah, exactly.
But I'm
Um,
just saying, I'm just asking. Generally, sometimes when I ask questions, I already know the answer. Just for other
yeah,
people
yeah, yeah,
listening, I'm like, what is that?
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So it was specifically targeting um the I'm trying to put it
Uh-huh.
politically, but I guess like the fucked up actions of ICE,
Mm-hmm.
and specifically discussing children who have either gone missing or are wrongfully detained at the border, just trying to cross with their families seeking asylum, and yeah, just the families that are down there
Yeah.
separated, trying to exercise their right to seek asylum and being treated like worse than criminals,
Mm-hmm.
being treated like absolute garbage.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's like another one of the many layers that people are looking at restructuring and
Yeah.
trying to like tear back down, find where the problem is, and build it back up in a
Mm-hmm.
way that's better. And ICE has definitely been a very problematic and inherently racist
Mm-hmm.
um organization. Is that the
How do
word?
you
Not
feel when you do this
organization, but
protest? Do you feel powerless or do you feel like powerful, I guess, for lack of a better word? Like, I just imagine myself doing it and I feel like I would, like, in it, it would be fun in the beginning. Like, I'd feel like, yes, we're giving a voice to this. We're with a bunch of people. We're
yeah.
trying to make change. We hate what happened. I think a part of me, I feel like, would then start to feel like, okay, we've been protesting for a week or two, but like, now what? Like, I want to start to see results of this work we're putting in. Do you then feel ever compelled to get into the political aspect of it, where you start to look at candidates, mayors, politicians, governors, to see what their beliefs are, and then start to try to become educated on all the laws and the bills and what each candidate's trying to propose and do? Because I feel like that would be the way for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I would evolve in terms of this because I feel like after protesting for a certain amount of time, I feel like I would not get discouraged, but like I'd want to start to see something happen.
Yeah,
Do you feel that?
burnout is definitely a thing that
Uh,
like many people who attend protests discuss, because especially for people who don't face discrimination in their everyday lives
yeah.
directly,
Mm-hmm.
I think that having it be on the forefront of your mind constantly all of a sudden is something that can lead to burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And it's problematic because you have this idea where like, oh, I've been down here for a month, I feel like I've done enough, I can go home and I can just rest and relax, I don't have to think about this anymore.
Yeah.
So I think what you're talking about, like becoming more educated on your local government, on your state government, on the federal government, and being, if you have the right to vote, if you have that privilege,
Mm-hmm.
I think like being more conscious of who you're voting for, as well as also, calling or writing emails
Mm-hmm.
to local government, and not just using template emails, but actually writing your own emails is
Yeah.
super important. And that's like something that I focus a lot of my energy on, because they have, it's like keyword searches, and so they can just basically disregard big chunks of emails if it comes from a template,
Oh,
because
interesting. Okay.
yeah, they'll just like throw it into a folder and it'll never get seen. But if you're writing it in your own
Mm-hmm.
words, maybe those keywords will pop up, but it's not going to be like a 98% word match,
Yeah.
so it's more likely to get read. And also making those phone calls and
Mm-hmm.
you know asking the people who are already sitting
Yeah.
in local or like larger offices, ask them to
Mm-hmm.
make the changes, like demand that these changes get made, and that the protesters are being listened to.
Would you say Bellingham is a racist city or not very racist, or like where do you think we land in terms of, I don't know what you'd call it,
I've
racism
been
or
thinking about this.
uh,
I think that it exists under the guise of being like a liberal bubble, kind of a safe haven.
yeah.
And it is an extremely white city.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that said, racism absolutely exists here. It's
Mm-hmm.
not immune to racism
Yeah.
today, and it also has a long history
Mm-hmm.
of racism, and the KKK being very present in Bellingham, in
That is
Ferndale, in
in Linden.
Linden.
That's very weird because I saw a post someone put up. I don't know if it's Facebook or Instagram of a KKK burning week crosses weekly up in Linden. The last one was in 1995, I think it was. It's insane to me.
Yeah.
I really wish I talked about this on a previous podcast that I could understand the emotion behind being racist. I just don't get it. And I made this point before in previous podcasts. Maybe I'm just like so introverted and like selfish with my own life that like I've never really cared what anyone else is doing. Like I wake up, I'm busy, I gotta go to work, I gotta make money, I gotta shop, I gotta clean my house, I gotta find time for my friends, time for me, time for my relationships. Then I have my hobbies and my interests and things I enjoy doing. Like, who the fuck is taking time out of their day where you have free time to go hate on any group that has nothing to do with you?
Yeah.
Whether they're like gay or whatever, black, or discriminate against anybody. Like, I don't understand. Like, I can't, I wish I could feel, like, put myself in those shoes where I could feel the emotion to try to, I just don't understand it. Like,
Yeah. It's often indoctrination
uh huh,
where, you know, they're around enough like-minded people, they exist in this kind of like echo chamber. And there
uh
are
huh,
echo chambers on either side. Like, you know,
mm-hmm,
there are people who only hear people that agree with them and only speak to people that agree with them,
uh huh,
and it becomes the entirety of your reality, and like
yeah.
your idea of the world around you is
It
based
becomes
on
like
what
your
everyone's
group.
saying.
And
Exactly.
it's like, I guess that makes sense. It's kind of like, I'm not trying to bash religion, but this is the easiest example I always have. It's like religion, for example. Like, if you are a Jehovah's Witness or a Christian or any kind of religious denomination, a Mormon, you're in that group
Yeah.
and you're with that group of people and you're all like minded and it's an echo chamber
Yeah.
and you guys go to your church gatherings, every Sunday or whatever day, and you believe the same thing, you think the same thing. So there's a sense of community within
Yeah.
that. And like you just said, it's probably indoctrinated
Yeah.
and they feel like, oh, this is our group,
Well, and they
you
also,
know?
people like it because, like I said earlier, we're a very individualized society, and
Yeah.
people like to feel like they're heard and have people affirm and validate that they're right.
Yeah.
Regardless of what their thoughts are, they want to feel like they are right
Yeah.
and that people are listening to what they're saying, and they want to feel like what they're
Mm-hmm.
saying is special. And if people give you that platform, then of course you're going to put your energy into saying whatever
Yeah.
you're saying to this group and trying to have other people hear you because you feel validated, you feel good
Mm-hmm.
about what you're doing, even if what you're doing is racist or discriminatory in any way.
And I think that's one of the points I was trying to make earlier in this podcast when I was talking about how there's always going to be kind of like good and evil, and like people pushing, like the world's never going to be perfect, and there's always going to be racism. It's never going to go away. It will forever exist. Um, at least as far as I can see. Maybe some insane enlightening happens on a massive scale with billions of people, wherever, where like because there's racism that exists in Asian cultures against other Asian people, and there's racism all over the place in the world, and so you always have to. That's why like these protests are good because it pushes back more against it,
Yeah.
and just try to keep things. It's always like this, right? There's never gonna be like, and it's just crazy, like the whole experiences of like fighting for things.
Yeah.
Where are you right now though, like mentally with like your thoughts and your feelings? Like, how do you feel about the whole situation right now? Are you outraged? Are you happy with the progress? Are you happy with what you've done? Do you feel frustrated? Do you feel like it's not changing, or like where do you feel? Like where are you at?
Um I feel angry
Uh huh.
a lot of the time, for sure. Um
At who or what?
just the state of the status quo
Mm-hmm.
right now. And what I would obviously really like to see sometime in the future is for it to become more taboo to
Mm-hmm.
be racist, because right now, especially with the president that we have,
Dude,
it's almost encouraged
it's
to
so
be
insane.
bigoted. and
Yeah.
and so, you know, I am feeling angry at a lot of what I'm seeing, and then at the same time I do feel really hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest reason being the like community that I've seen and that I've found through protesting. And you know, the most positive thing I think that came out of it directly is just seeing like this community of especially young people coming together and like helping each other out, even in the thick of, you know, tear gas and rubber bullets being shot at each other. Like, people were carrying each other out, people were
Mm-hmm.
taking care of those who like couldn't see, couldn't run fast enough, couldn't,
Yeah.
you know, that people who had like gotten injured in the middle of it. No one was like pushing each other out of the way. It wasn't, you know, the individualism that I'm used to. It was this collective of people coming together. And the whole point of it is, you know, I'm here for you. I'm
Mm-hmm.
here to protect you. I'm here to like yell and scream and, you know,
Yeah.
like be there to shelter you when you're breaking shit. Like, that's another thing you'll
Mm-hmm.
see is people stand in front of each other with umbrellas when they're like vandalizing property.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just to protect the identities of people who have every right to protest
Mm-hmm.
in whatever way they want to. I think that's the biggest thing is like there's no wrong way to protest.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just seeing this community of people come together and, all be there for each other instead of just for themselves
Mm-hmm.
has given me a lot of hope that, maybe with this younger generation, we're going to see it become more taboo to be a bigot, to be a racist, to be a homophobe, to, hold on to these very archaic and like shitty ideas that are taking actual rights away from people. Like, it's not just
Yeah.
being mean, you're actually taking people's rights away
Mm-hmm.
and asking for their rights to be taken away because you don't see them as much as you are.
Yeah.
So,
And so, what are your plan moving forward? I know you're still doing some protests.
yeah.
Do you have you thought about like where you want to take your energy and like go with the momentum of which direction you want to travel or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just, you know, I'm here mostly to be as supportive as I
Uh
can
huh.
as a white person. I'm here to like make sure that the powers that be see that there are white people, the people that they value over people of color, are also there and are also angry. And like our presence can often like physically protect
Mm-hmm.
people of color while they're protesting as well. So I think it's important to just be there and be supportive wherever I can.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what that's going to look like going
Mm-hmm.
forward, but um, yeah, it's kind of
Do you have any
planning to continue
Instagram
that.
pages that you follow that you'd recommend to anyone listening that you think has good information? I know when
Oh
you were
boy.
like when I saw you, because obviously I follow you, and I saw you making those posts in Seattle, I was really
Yeah.
curious. I'm like, oh, well, what's it like? That's when I DM'd you. But then I noticed you had mentioned in one of your posts that you stopped posting because you didn't know if certain people wanted to be on. Because I remember you had one post, a video post
I
of
had
some guy
posted a
speaking that you took down, and
Yeah,
then
I had posted a live video during one of the nights where we were being tear gassed where you can see a lot of what was going on the
uh huh,
police end, but I took it down because there were so many people's faces showing,
yeah,
and I felt uncomfortable with that because I know that people have been tracked down
mm-hmm,
through Instagram posts, through Twitter, through Facebook, and arrested
yeah,
for actions at the protests. So I wanted to protect the identities of people.
mm-hmm,
Um as far as things to follow, there are a ton. I actually, on my own Instagram page, I have a like stories highlight
uh
of a
huh.
bunch of different resources for petitions, places to donate, pages to
Do you want to
follow.
shout out your Instagram, or do you
Um,
want to keep it private?
yeah,
It's up
no,
to you.
sure, yeah, I'm fine with
uh
that.
huh.
It is at Alexis on Film.
I'll put it up on screen too
Yeah,
for everyone to see it. But
perfect. Yeah, that's
uh huh.
me, and I don't claim to be any kind of like authority on
Mm-hmm.
this issue. But I've been trying to be as conscious as possible about posting reliable resources for people to click through to that follow me. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if anybody wants to go look at
Yeah. Well,
that.
that's cool. How do you feel? I mean, back to the president thing with Trump real quick. I mean, it's so shocking to have a president like we have who's just so like inflammatory and seems like a racist and it's just like how is this? I always imagine like what if you're like the vice president? You go home at night to your wife and you're like, "What the fuck?" Like this guy.
Pence is worse.
Because there's no way people in his administration. I mean, do they not go home at night and their wife or husband or whoever isn't like, what are you doing? That guy's fucking nuts. Like you see all these people who are like, in his administration, and there's got to be other, that's the thing about these parties is like the Republicans just stay silent or don't bash. I mean, occasionally some of them do go against some things he's saying, but it's just like
Yeah,
there's the whole presidency is Democrats versus Republicans, and the Republicans, no matter how batshit crazy Trump is or what he says, don't say anything. They keep their mouth shut,
yeah,
especially with because it can ruin their career, and especially with like an election coming up in November.
yeah.
Oh my God, it's just so nuts. It's so crazy to me to have a president like that. And then I'm not too excited about Biden either. I just
No.
feel like this presidency, this election is just like it felt a lot like the last one to me.
That's been my thing. Is like, is this really the best that we can do?
It's not.
Are
It's
these the
definitely
best
not.
people we can
It's
do?
definitely not. I would probably vote for some of my friends over fucking to be president over like some of these candidates. I was
Yeah,
just like, I just don't understand how they decide who to prop up. Like Biden, the dude's got Alzheimer's. He's gonna be 78 in November. 78 years old. Like who's got
Which is funny because the media tore down Bernie for being too old, even though he was only a couple years older than Trump at the time when he was running for
It's,
candidacy.
dude, this guy can barely keep a sentence together. So, I mean, and it has been accused of sexual stuff. That one woman who came out, I don't know if you heard about that, and he said he
I
didn't
did.
remember. And it's just like, dude, why can't we just have someone in their 40s or 50s who's like young, has a vitality in them?
Yeah.
It's just way smarter. These candidates that they give us are always so disappointing and lackluster. It's like, ugh, like who do you even vote for? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Oh, it's frustrating.
definitely. It can be disheartening, but I think that's why it's important if you can to not just vote in the federal election, but like be involved in voting in the primaries
Yeah,
and caucusing and I don't know, just pay attention to
I know.
who is running for candidacy and don't just blindly vote
I
for
always wonder
whoever.
too, like the people who do support, like say Trump, for example, and voted for him. I always try really hard to get into the mindset of like what they're attracted to, right? Like what is it that won that vote? Because most people don't do any kind of real research on any issues. Again, I talked about this in previous podcasts. Like if you're going to fully understand immigration, racism, um, like Trump wanting to pull troops, out from overseas, if you're going to truly understand climate change, you can't just get your little news bites from Instagram and the news.
Yeah.
You have to go read books on climate change, look at the reports from the UN, look at people who say it's bullshit, look at people who say it's not bullshit. And you have to thoroughly research and take in information. It's the same thing with immigration. You have to learn, how did we get this way? Why is it this way? How could we make it better? People who are for the current system, people who are against it. You have to educate yourself and become a student of the issues to fully understand them. And most of us, including me, don't have a full understanding of anything. Like economics, like the trade war we're doing with China. Why are we doing it? I don't really know. Like the whole immigration thing, I know a little bit. I've listened to some talks on it. Climate change, like all these issues. How many of us have read books, listened to podcasts and lectures and debates? Most of us are just getting, we're Team Trump, we're Team Democrat, we're Republican, we're this, we're that, and whatever my group supports, I support, without having any thorough understanding or knowledge.
Yeah.
You have a little bit of knowledge where you can utter a sentence or two, but then you got nothing.
Yeah.
you know, and that's how most people are. And so when you see a guy like Trump who got elected, you're like, well, how? Well, like he's charismatic. He says all kinds of crazy shit. He's kind of a bully. He's narcissistic. He's an
Yeah.
egomaniac. He lies, has no accountability. He blames everyone else. And I think, well, who would gravitate towards a person like that? And there's a
Yeah.
lot of people who gravitate towards alpha males or people who exert this confidence, which is fake, but there's people out there that just are drawn to a certain personality type, whether he's full of shit without knowing anything, who are going to vote for him. There's also people who are frustrated with their lives, who might be poor or who are just sick of their life and their economy and their low paying jobs, and they don't make enough to pay rent
Yeah.
because rent's gone through the roof and the cost of living's really high, and like what the fuck. And then they get a guy like Trump who's like completely insane, says wild off the cuff shit, and like
Yeah.
this is the guy who's going to change this shit, because we get these puppet politicians every year who say they're going to do this and that and things will get better, and they don't, and we still don't have health care.
That's the thing
And
is
it's
that's
like,
how he spun his platform is like I'm not a politician.
yeah,
I've never been a politician, so like I'm going to break this cookie cutter idea of what a politician is,
uh-huh,
and so many people were drawn to that.
yeah,
And I also think that it's partially because we have a bipartisan system
yeah,
and people just blindly
mm-hmm,
are blue or red and they
yeah,
associate certain traits with either side, and so instead of doing all that research like you were saying, they just blindly are like, well, I'm on this side, so
yeah,
this is who I'm voting for, like this is who I like now.
yeah,
And it's again that like
mm-hmm,
indoctrination of just hearing a bunch of people who agree
yeah.
with you and feeling like you should also agree with them, and
And how
it's very
cool would it have
cyclical.
been in a fantasy world if when he became president, he actually became a badass fucking president where he did actually fix things and we had awesome health care and he wasn't a racist and
But he like convinced
like
everyone to rally behind
he
him and then was
did,
like, all right, I'm going to be
yeah,
progressive.
all these awesome promises of things. What if he got up there and just totally bashed the whole system and was like, this shit's all corrupt, this party over here. Here's some stuff they don't want you to know.
That would have been
We need to
cool.
fix this healthcare, and we need to fix this, and we're gonna fix that, and we're gonna do that, and then did it. Instead, he's just like all about himself and being popular and
Yeah.
ego, and attacking people on Twitter, and like doesn't do such a disappointment, man.
Yeah.
You were the one guy that could have had there's rare chance where you're not the one guy who's not a politician. You turned out to be like the worst ever.
Yeah, you're not like grandfathered into the system, but now here you are.
And
Just
how insane would it be if he gets elected again, right? What chance do you give him?
I don't know if it would be that insane because we all thought it was going to be insane if he did the first time.
Yeah.
None of us thought it was going to happen.
Uh-huh.
And then it did.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my god, it'd be such a circus. And I'm curious, like I'm almost kind of just being entertained by this because if Trump wins, disaster, another circus for 4 years. If Biden wins, how long is this dude gonna hold on before he breaks mentally? You know, and then his vice president, whoever his VP is, will become president. We might have the first female president ever. Because to think he's gonna be a president from 78 to 82, and then go another 4 years to 86, dude.
It's old.
Good luck.
He's
Good luck
already
with
in rough
that.
shape. Yeah.
I know. All right, well, we'll wrap this up. Is there anything else? I'll point people to your Instagram. Is there any kind of lasting parting message you want to give to people other than go out there, help out, educate yourself on the issues? Is there anything you want to shout out?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would never expect everybody to be a front lines protester kind of person.
Yeah.
It definitely isn't, the way that everybody wants to choose to be active, but I think it's important for everybody to still focus on being active in whatever way you feel you can. Whether it be educating yourself, whether it be having really difficult conversations with the people in your life that disagree with you and disagree with the movements that are happening around the country and around the globe right now.
Yeah.
I think, spending your money in ways that are more conscious and more active, supporting businesses that don't already have billions of dollars, almost trillions of dollars, and, focusing, also donating your money to causes that need your dollars right now. And just, I don't know, there's a lot of information out there. I think just, listening and seeking it out and participating however you can.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Knowledge is everything. Just learning about the issues and thinking on your own.
Yeah.
Very helpful. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
It's been a while since I've even seen you. For everyone listening, I used to see you all the time at the Temple Bar, and now I don't.
Yeah, well, no one does right now.
I
know,
right? So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.